And it looks like it's noon, so I'll have y'all turn off your mics or whatever if you're comfortable with that. And you might find a seat. You might choose to sit in a chair that might have a little bit harder of a bottom to it. If all you have is a recliner or couch, that works too, or a car seat. Just if you're driving, to be mindful of not getting too relaxed, staying alert. Anyway, welcome. So if you'd like, you might lengthen your spine. So you might be lengthening your spine, maybe noticing your breath. I just noticed I was holding my breath. So if you notice that, sometimes one option can be to invite your breath in. So you might invite yourself to breathe if you were holding your breath. And maybe tilting your head to one side. So you might tilt your head to one side so that maybe your ear moves in the direction of your shoulder. So you might have your head tilted to one side, maybe noticing the breath. And perhaps bringing your head back to center, you might switch sides, so you might tilt your head the other way. So maybe tilting your head to one side. And if your head is tilted to one side, you might notice some sensation in the side of your neck. You might notice it somewhere else, or maybe not at all. And if your head is tilted to the side, you could bring it back to center and maybe rolling your shoulders. So you could roll your shoulders forward or you could roll your shoulders back. So you have a choice. Perhaps noticing your breath. And if you've been moving your shoulders, you might bring them back to center and maybe reaching one arm up to the sky. So you might reach one arm up to the sky and you could stay here. Another option might be to place your bottom hand on the chair or couch you're sitting on, or maybe on your leg, and perhaps leaning to one side. So you might be leaning to one side, maybe noticing the breath. You might notice movement in your belly or chest as you breathe. You might notice it somewhere else, maybe not at all. If you're leaning to the side, you might lift back up to center and perhaps switching sides. So you might lift your other arm up towards the sky, maybe staying here. Another option could be to lean to the other side. So you might be leaning to one side, maybe placing your bottom arm on your chair or your leg. You have a choice. And if you're leaning to one side, you might notice some sensation in the shoulder of your top arm. You might notice it somewhere else, or maybe not at all. And perhaps lifting back up to center. You might turn your torso to the right. So you might be turning your torso to the right, maybe placing your left hand on your right leg, perhaps placing your right hand behind you. And if you're turning to the right, you might notice some sensation across your back or abdomen. You might notice it somewhere else, or maybe not at all. And perhaps if you're turned to one side, you might face back to center, and you're welcome to switch sides. So you might turn towards the left, maybe placing your right hand on the left leg, perhaps placing your left hand behind you on on the chair. So you might be turning to the left, maybe noticing sensation across your back, maybe in your neck, or maybe somewhere else. And if you're turned to one side, you might return back to center and perhaps lifting one leg and foot up off the ground. And you might rotate your foot in one direction. So you might roll your foot in one direction. And then maybe switching directions. So you might be rotating your foot in the other direction. Maybe noticing sensation in your ankle or the lower part of your leg. And perhaps releasing. So you might place that foot on the floor. And you're welcome to switch sides. So maybe extending your other leg out. And you might rotate your foot in one direction. And perhaps switching directions. So if you've been rotating your foot in one direction, you might roll your foot the other way. And maybe releasing, you might place your foot on the floor. And one option might be to cross your right leg over your left. And I apologize if you can hear our dog barking. There are some squirrels tormenting him lately. So you might have one leg crossed over. And you could stay here, maybe lifting your spine to the sky. Another option could be to hinge at your hips, maybe folding forward. So you have a choice. And you're welcome to notice your breath. Maybe noticing movement in your chest or throat as you breathe. You might notice it somewhere else. Or maybe not at all. And perhaps lifting back up. You're welcome to switch sides. So maybe crossing your other leg over. So you might have your ankle on your opposite thigh. And perhaps lengthening your spine to the sky. You could stay here. Another option could be to lean forward. So you might hinge at your hips, maybe leaning forward. Perhaps resting your hands on your leg. You have a choice. You're welcome to notice the breath. Maybe noticing some sensation in the outer hip of your top leg. You might notice it somewhere else. Or maybe not at all. Perhaps releasing. And you're welcome to extend one leg out in front of you. So you might place the heel of one foot out in front of you, maybe moving your leg towards straight. So you might have one leg extended on the floor in front of you. And maybe staying here, you might lengthen your spine to the sky. Another option could be to hinge at your hips, maybe folding forward. Perhaps placing your forearms on your legs, or maybe reaching your hands to the floor. You have a choice. Perhaps noticing sensation in the back of your extended leg. You might notice it somewhere else. Or maybe not at all. And perhaps lifting back up. You're welcome to switch sides. So maybe extending your other leg out in front of you. And perhaps placing your heel on the floor. You might lengthen your spine and stay here. Another option could be to hinge at your hips, maybe folding forward to place your hands or forearms on your thighs, perhaps reaching your hands to the floor. You have a choice. And if you're folded forward, you might lift back up and perhaps bringing your leg back in and maybe moving through some cow cats. So perhaps as you inhale, you might shift your belly forward, maybe lifting your chest and lifting your head up to the sky. And perhaps as you exhale, you might round your spine, perhaps lowering your chin to your chest. You're welcome to do that again. Maybe inhaling, you might drop your belly forward, maybe lifting your head and chest. And perhaps as you exhale, you might round your spine, perhaps lowering your chin to your chest. You're welcome to do that a couple more times with your own breath. And perhaps returning to seated. So you might be seated, and one option might be to lean back slightly. So you might lean back slightly so that maybe your shoulders are not touching the back of your chair. So you might lean back slightly, perhaps noticing some sensation in your abdominals. You might notice it somewhere else, or maybe not at all. And if you've been leaning back slightly, you might lift back up, perhaps connecting with your breath. And you're welcome to do that again. So maybe leaning back slightly, you might notice sensation in your abdominals. Another option might be to lift your feet up. So you might be leaning back slightly, perhaps having your feet lifted, or you might have your feet on the ground. You have a choice. And perhaps releasing. If you'd like, on an inhale breath, you might reach your arms up overhead. And perhaps as you exhale, you might fold forward. So you might fold forward, maybe placing your hands on the floor or on your legs. Maybe noticing the breath. And one option could be to bring your feet and knees wider apart as you fold. You could have them closer together. You have a choice. If you'd like, maybe on an inhale, you might lift up halfway, perhaps placing your hands on the front of your shins. And maybe as you're exhaling, you might fold. Perhaps on an inhale, you might reach your arms up overhead. And maybe as you exhale, you might bring your hands down through heart center, back by your sides. And if you'd like, you're welcome to find a place to rest. So you might stay seated as you are, you might lean back in your chair. And so we'll just take about a minute to rest. Some people, when they rest, like to have movement when they rest. So one option could be to run the pads of your fingers over the pads of your thumbs. Maybe noticing the breath. If you're noticing your breath, you might notice movement in your belly or chest as you breathe. You might release the breath. You'll be resting for about another 30 seconds. You might notice your breath. Maybe making movement with your fingers and toes. And you're welcome to stay resting where you are longer, or if you like, you might make your way up to seated. It's been my pleasure to guide your practice today. Peace. Thank you so much for being here, friends. It was good to see you.